The best way to privately lurk on Twitter is at risk. Meta is making major changes to how minors can use their platforms, and Windows has some positive updates for once. All of this and more is coming up on This Week in Privacy episode 68, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we've been working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity while answering viewer questions. I'm Jordan, and with me this week is Jonah. How are you, Jonah?
I'm doing pretty well. Pretty uneventful week, I think, but yeah, we got some good news to talk about today, so yeah, I'm excited about that. How are you doing, Jordan?
Yeah, good. Ready to dive into some really interesting news topics this week. I guess we can dive straight into the first story here, and this is from TechCrunch. X sends cease and desist to open source project Nitter over alleged scraping. Nitter, an open source project that allowed people to read X posts without logging in or even opening the X app, has received cease and desist letters from X demanding that it shut down. The news was shared via a brief message posted to the project's website and follows X's earlier attempts to knock Nitter offline by technical means. The service also powers a number of other sites, including X Cancel, which allowed people to view X posts directly. This isn't X's first attempt to shut down Nitter. In 2024, Nitter's flagship instance, Nitter.net, went dark temporarily after X rolled out new API restrictions. Nitter worked by fetching public X posts and then stripping out the ads, tracking cookies, and JavaScript, giving people a clean and clutter-free way to read posts without an account or the app. After the crackdown, those who wanted to host a Nitter instance had to connect it to a real X account, according to the project's GitHub page. Despite the restrictions, development picked back up and Nitter instances came back online. This time, X is working to shut down Nitter and its instances via legal means. Nitter's website states that the Nitter.net project is offline while its creator seeks legal advice after receiving a cease and desist letter. That creator, a developer who goes by the name of Zedius, told TechCrunch by email that other Nitter instances received similar letters. The letter from X, which TechCrunch has viewed, accuses Nitter of an unlawful use and circumvention of X's application programming interface and associated data through its service, saying that X has evidence that Nitter scraped X data and accessed X accounts and session tokens in violation of X's rules. Lawyers for X said the actions are in violation of various state and federal laws, including but not limited to the Texas Harmful Access by Computer Act and the Lanham Act. The letter gave Nitter until 5 p.m. EST on August 25th to shut down, and they have now shut down. So I guess we can dive in here into, some discussion questions. Why is Twitter doing this?
I mean, Twitter definitely has an interest. I think we've seen this especially from Twitter and Reddit. They don't want people accessing their data outside of their apps because they sell this data to like AI companies and stuff through their API for training and that sort of purpose. So all of this free access kind of through these front ends, while it's useful for people who just want to access Twitter, it's also a way that they could certainly scrape all of that data, companies, if all of that is available. And so that's kind of a business interest that they have in shutting this down. It's unfortunate because I think this is going to affect a lot of people, since unfortunately a lot of companies and even news organizations or government agencies still post like announcements to Twitter and official things. I know that we frequently see like tweets from the Graphene OS project, for example, we would see in our communities, because they post a lot of updates there. Luckily, in that case, they also post the same posts pretty much all the time to their Mastodon. So we have that option to access it, but like a lot of similar projects will not be mirroring their posts to Mastodon or other services in the same way that more privacy focused projects like Graphene OS would. So for a lot of those software projects or for other organizations, it sucks because then you really need to just have a Twitter account, use their app, and give away a lot of information just to read posts that aren't accessible via any other means, because people have not gotten into the habit of using more than one platform to post even now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have seen even like, US government agencies, they'll like post updates on Twitter and it's like, well, is that really like it used to be that Twitter was like the public square or whatever they used to call it, and it was like the place where you go for the updates, right? And everyone could access it. You didn't need an account. But now it seems like that's sort of almost become like Facebook and Instagram. You do need an account to access basically anything on Twitter, without, the severe restrictions on what you can access, basically. Which
Yeah,
I
pretty
agree is
much.
probably due to scraping, but
I mean, Twitter has always been like you would see tweets embedded in news posts all the time, just like statements that people were making, just because a lot of newsworthy content was shared there, and it was so easy to access. You could just share a link to it. You could always view it. You could embed its tweets in your news posts or whatever, and people would just be able to read them on the internet. And there were certainly some tracking aspects to like embedding Twitter into all of these sites, but it was still accessible, and all of that stuff is just kind of being shut down. So yeah, they're definitely closing themselves off, which I guess was to be expected. Again, because of all the AI stuff, especially. But yeah, it's a bad sign, and it's a bad sign that these laws are able to do this, because like all of the information that's on Twitter, it's not like private data still. Like that is information that's been shared to the public by people who aren't intending to like restrict their data behind or their posts behind these paywalls. It's a business decision for Twitter to try and lock it down, but it's kind of a similar argument to like using an ad blocker, right? Like using uBlock Origin also isn't illegal because Twitter is sharing this information onto the internet. And once it's publicly accessible, like once the data gets to your computer, what you do with it is kind of up to you. They can't control it at that point anymore. But Twitter is basically, or X, should probably stop calling it Twitter. But they are basically saying that they do have that control, and that they can control not only like the information that they serve, but also how you consume that data. And I think that is a dangerous precedent for a lot of different front ends and technologies. So yeah, I would definitely be worried about that, because I think a lot of other front ends that people use that are similar to Nitter would be at risk. And hopefully there are some groups who are able to push back against this, because that becomes a lot more concerning if this is going to impact these software projects beyond just Twitter. I think I'd be worried about that.
yeah, I think this does actually kind of remind me a little bit. I don't know if you remember, but YouTube DL at some point also got issued a cease and desist, and it was like, oh no, now how are we going to access like YouTube? How are we going to download YouTube videos properly? And what ended up happening was like they had a fork called YT DLP, and now the project is still going. So I do wonder if like this could be one of these resilience things with open source, that like, someone else forks this and it becomes a separate project that, maybe doesn't get cease and desisted. But I don't really know how they could modify it so that it wouldn't be breaching these. I mean, these state and federal laws, is there any precedent to know that if these are actually applicable to this even? This seems like a fairly like precedent setting sort of thing.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I saw a question from Ultra Pain in the chat here. What actually is Nitter? We should probably address that first for anyone who is unfamiliar. Nitter is basically we call them front ends, and there's a bunch of different ones for different websites. There's like Invidious for YouTube, for example. But what they do is like it's an alternative web page that you can go to that will display data from like a service like Twitter or YouTube, without having to like actually load Twitter yourself or load any of the resources like JavaScript that they're running or trackers or really access Twitter directly. It kind of like acts as a man in the middle basically to show you data from Twitter without having to access Twitter yourself. And so with Nitter, for example, you could get like an X post that's like x.com. You get the link for it and you just replace the x.com part of it with like nitter.net or whatever Nitter instance you're using. There's a bunch of different ones. I don't know what the main ones people use are now, but you just replace the x.com with that, and then it'll show you that Twitter post and all of the replies without having to access Twitter. Because a lot of the time these days, when you click like a link to x.com, it'll say like, oh, to read this, you have to sign in and that sort of thing. And that's kind of what people are avoiding the most when they share these Nitter links. It's just to be able to read that content without having to make an account, because a lot of people like they just want to read a single tweet or some of the replies. They don't want to like use Twitter and follow a bunch of people, etc. And so Jordan is showing like, for example, a Nitter page for the Framasoft profile, and you can see their profile picture, their bio, and like all of their posts basically. But this is not on Twitter itself. It's on this separate website where you can't interact with Twitter, but you also don't need to have like an account to sign in to access all of that basically. So it's just a way to read that content without an account, without connecting directly to Twitter if you're concerned about, getting their trackers in your browser or like sharing your IP with them, etc. And so there will be other front ends like that for other services, but yeah, that's basically how it works. Somebody in the chat said that there are other front ends like Nitter that you do need an account. And so there are sometimes front ends where like you can supply your own credentials or API key to kind of bypass these things. Yeah, exactly like you said, to access it without needing to like access the actual website or sign in every time. But there is still some tracking involved, in the sense that like if you're using your own credentials, they can kind of see what you're accessing and that sort of thing, but you still don't have to use their apps or their websites. So yeah, a lot of different projects that do this basically, and Nitter is one of the biggest ones when it comes to X, just because X has gotten more and more annoying with forcing people to sign in just to read these posts. A lot of the posts, again, which are like in the public interest, because so many organizations again are posting like official announcements only to X, and there's no other way to access this stuff, which is an annoying thing. I know Proton does a very similar thing with Reddit, where like they will post a lot of official announcements there instead of like their own website or blog, and then Reddit has the same problem where they're forcing more and more signups. I think yeah, somebody, Anon QYW in the chat also pointed that out. Like that's another site that's been super annoying. And I think Reddit started blocking like access to the old version of Reddit, without the redesign, without signing in. So yeah, it's just a general trend that we're definitely seeing on the internet. As far as the laws that the lawyers for X stated, I'm not familiar with how they could potentially apply to this case. I'd have to look into that, but a lot of the times, we don't really know for sure until we see it tested in court and stuff. As far as I know, there's no precedent to stopping. There's no precedent to against any of these front ends or similar services, from what I can tell. I believe like the YouTube situation, a lot of that was kind of based on the trademark having YouTube in the name, for example. So it makes sense that they shut down. But obviously YT, DLP, is they're still around and they're still running. And we see that a lot with a lot of these open source projects that get shut down. I think it's very possible that like this creator will just kind of no longer develop Nitter because it is really annoying to deal with. But the nature of these open source projects is like now that the code is out there, now that I mean, I assume it still works. People will still be able to run their own instances and continue developing it and hosting it and forking it if until Twitter like finds a way to block this entirely. I don't know what methods they would have to do that, but like at the end of the day, you know, violating the Twitter terms of service or whatever, it's not like against the law, right? Or it shouldn't be at the very least. And so there, I would imagine a fork of this will certainly crop up, even if Nitter itself goes away.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. Currently, the repository is archived by the owner, which happened on August 26th. It's read-only, so I do wonder how long it's going to take for X to maybe DMCA the entire repository and get it completely deleted. Again, though, like this Zedius person, like I'm sure they don't really have the funds and they don't have the lawyers to really defend themselves against this, even if they wanted to, right? So we probably won't even see anything happen here. It might just be that the project is dead, and that's kind of where it goes. So that would be kind of interesting to see, but like in a lot of these cases, it's like easier to just drop everything, which kind of sucks, but it'll be interesting to see how things go. I've already seen alternatives to Nitter popping up already. So people have got their own versions of it. So it's definitely very much alive in that aspect, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens. I guess we could talk a little bit about Terracotta Pie said, can anything be done to counter this? And this is where it kind of sucks because like a lot of what Jonas said is like, you know, these organizations, they post on specific platforms and it's kind of hard to just force a company to or the government to, you know, start posting on alternative platforms that are more open. We've definitely seen it becoming a little bit more common. I noticed that there was some government accounts on Blue Sky, for instance, which has its own issues. I think this is definitely, they also have a similar issue with sign-ins and stuff like that, but it's definitely less of an issue on Blue Sky. But yeah, it's just sort of, you know, you can try and switch to these alternative platforms like Mastodon, like we recommend, and hopefully these companies will start trying to follow suit and move over to these platforms and post more on there, because it's definitely better to have information be accessible. Or, you know, we could just go back to like good old websites and blogs. But
If only.
I think people are a bit over that, I think, at this point.
I think this is a good time to bring up one of the posts in our forum thread for this episode. At the last post here, if you see it, Jordan, someone named 763 Rochelle posted, just dropping by to mention that some public Nitter instances still exist, one being their own. Some of us are fighting back and refuse to let this great project die. And they posted a link to some instances that are still working and a wiki instance on a Codeberg repo related to this about with more information about like kind of the legal aspects of this or preventing DMCA reports from taking down instances. So some good resources there, I think, that people could take a look at, and I can probably share like a link to this forum thread here in the chat here. I'll post it now. But yeah, some good stuff to check out. Definitely, I think we'll see a lot of this, people kind of taking it into their own hands, because like I said, the open source stuff is out there, and there's always going to be a lot of options. Hopefully people are able to pick up the development if the original developer decides to kind of bow out because of these issues. But it doesn't seem like it should be a legal issue to access this data.
Definitely.
Um, let's see here. Before we move on to the next story, we'll do one question from the chat here. Traveling Gamer asks, I have a few YouTuber friends and they've featured me on their channel as their real name, and I feel like it'd be weird to start posting videos using a different name. How important is this on YouTube? I guess I'd wonder what the situation is like. Were they featuring like your YouTube channel, or will you just be doing it independently? I think it isn't probably that strange to like adopt a stage name or a different name if that's what you want to do. I don't think it would make a huge difference, but if you want to like keep it independent for privacy reasons, you'd have to just keep that in mind. Try and avoid those terms, but I don't think it's that strange to start using a different name if you would prefer to go under a different name. Yeah, I don't know if I have any additional advice. Jordan, do you have any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think if you do want to keep things separate, like, yeah, I would probably think about it very long and hard, because once you link things together, it's linked together forever. So
Yeah.
I would say, though, if you do end up linking them together, you can use the collaboration feature, which we've been using actually quite a bit. So like if you had those videos that you had with your real name, you could ask your friends to also link your other channel as well, which hopefully would make it less confusing for them. But yeah, good luck on your YouTubing journey.
But why don't we move on to the next story here then? This one is from Bleeping Computer. Android 17 adds ECH support to make web browsing harder to track. ECH, or Encrypted Client Hello, acts as a privacy extension for TLS, which is the protocol that secures your internet connections when you see HTTPS in the browser. That's the security that TLS adds. What ECH does is it encrypts the opening part of the TLS connection that reveals the connected host name via server name indication. So basically right now, when you access a site like, we'll say like Privacy Guides, the Privacy Guides forum, people will be able to see that you're accessing discuss.privacyguides.net. Through this, they won't be able to see what specific page that you're accessing, but they can still see the domain name itself. ECH tries to go a step further and kind of hide the domain name that you're connecting to as well, to kind of obfuscate what you're doing on the internet, which is good, because otherwise, even when you're making these encrypted connections, your internet service provider, the people operating your Wi-Fi, etc., can still see that destination. They can collect it for profiling purposes, etc. And so we've seen this in some browsers, and now Android users currently benefit from ECH when you're browsing with like Google Chrome, or if you're using the Firefox app, but now Android 17 will incorporate the protections at the platform level. So other apps will be able to use it. ECH will be enabled by default for apps that are targeting Android 17, provided they use a compatible networking library. So it depends on the developers supporting it. On servers that don't support ECH, which is a lot of web servers right now, Android is going to send a fake ECH looking field called ECH grease, so that real ECH connections don't stand out against the rest, but the host name will still be visible, so it won't provide the complete protections that ECH would normally provide. Let's see. They say that beyond rolling out broader support for ECH on Android, Google also announced a few more important network protections that improve user security and privacy through their combined use. The first is adjustments to local network protection that now require apps to obtain permission before scanning for or connecting to devices on the user's local network. And the second is that Android 17 now enables certificate transparency by default, requiring website certificates to appear in public logs, hence making the use of forged certificates more evident. Google also announced that participating mobile operators will now be able to turn off 2G automatically for subscribers, reducing their exposure to SMS blasters and rogue base stations that can deliver malicious messages or capture sensitive traffic from nearby devices. So yeah, a lot of networking security related improvements coming to Android 17, which is pretty great, I think. Um, Before we get into these discussion points, did you see anything in this article, Jordan, that I hadn't mentioned there that you wanted to bring up?
I think I will just quickly touch on Oddbyte's comment here. ECH doesn't stop ISPs from collecting IP addresses connected to DNS queries. So yeah, that is the main thing that ECH doesn't protect against. But like,
Yep.
considering how many, like, you know, a lot of services use like content delivery networks. So like, you're probably connecting to the same IP address as like a bunch of other people. So that information is less pertinent, I would say. I did remember there was other ways that, you know, ISPs could collect that information. I believe it was like OCSP, like certificates and stuff like that, that I'm not sure if that has also been patched as well. But that would be interesting to see. I know I feel like there was someone who did like a more in-depth like privacy analysis, because I think a lot of people are going to be thinking like, do I need a VPN anymore? Like, if I have encrypted client hello, is this really necessary? But I think, you know, protecting your IP address is also an important thing, and they'll still know which IP address you're connecting to, which could be revealing in some cases.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, ECH is a part of the puzzle that was needed in addition to like encrypted DNS, because we saw encrypted DNS technologies come out far before this, and a lot of people were like, now that I've encrypted my DNS queries, now my ISP can't see what domains I'm requesting or connecting to anymore. And that wasn't the case because of server name indication. With these HTTPS connections, it would still reveal your domain name. And so ECH absolutely like works in tandem with this encrypted DNS, where now it's two components that reveal your domain name. The domain name that you're connecting to are now being patched, but the IP address of the web server that you're connecting to still remains. So a big improvement that ECH makes is honestly just to the Cloudflare network more than anything else, because so many websites are behind Cloudflare, and they are able to basically hide all of these websites behind like a handful of IP addresses, so you can't really figure out what it is. But when it comes to all of these sites that aren't hosted behind like gigantic CDN platforms, ECH is going to have a much more limited benefit. Even like the privacy guides forum example that I gave earlier. If we don't have ECH enabled right now for a variety of reasons. It's very difficult to enable as like a web server operator at the moment, unfortunately. But even if we did, like the forum is the only website that's being hosted on the IP address that we use. We don't share it with other websites at the moment. So that is still a way to identify what websites you're visiting, absolutely. And then on the other hand, exactly like you said, websites are still going to be able to see your IP address that you're connecting to. So for those two reasons, using a VPN still is going to provide protections that encrypted DNS and encrypted client hello aren't going to provide. But there's still definite improvements, and I think we're just continuing to make progress towards more private by default connections, because DNS, because the server name indication, these things being exposed in plain text for a very long time was problematic. And it's good to see that like these kind of legacy components, as far as how all of this works, are finally being addressed in some way. But exactly as, I mean, Oddbyte just said it in the chat too, it's not a replacement for VPNs, and that kind of stuff won't be a replacement for VPNs, at least for a very long time. There are a lot of improvements that would still need to be made.
Definitely. And I would say, I'm not sure who wrote this page up. It might have been you, Jonah, or another team member, but the DNS overview page in the advanced topics section of our website is extremely good at explaining this. If you're still confused about like, oh, what is server name indication? Like, what is all this about? Like, it kind of goes through things and explains basically what Jonah just said, but in like, you know, it shows you Wireshark,
Yeah, there's some
scans and stuff
examples
like that.
there, some more details. Definitely check that out. We could probably leave a link to that in the chat too for anyone who wants to take a look. But yeah, we got a lot of good stuff on our website. You can learn a lot if you check out the knowledge base tab on privacyguides.org for sure.
Definitely. Is there any, it is for sure better, but stuff like DPI/DNS querying are still a problem. Yeah. So I think it's not going to replace, like Trona said, it's not going to replace a VPN, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. I think one interesting thing about this is that it will require developers to opt into this on Android. So it'll be interesting to see. I feel like Google is in one of these positions where it could just literally force everyone. I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't. I suppose governments that want to censor the internet could think that that could cause connection issues maybe. But it is something that I think would be good to see. Basically every app utilizing it should be like the default of the internet. This should have been how it was, like the internet, how the internet was from the start, but we finally got here in 2026. There were a couple of like smaller other things in the Google update, as well as the ECH stuff, which also looked quite interesting. One of the things was Google announcing that they would be able to have carriers be able to turn off 2G automatically, which
Finally.
I'm not really sure who's using 2G still. Is 2G still being used? Apparently. I'm not sure, but
I mean,
I know 3G.
Yeah, it's good to turn it off like on a device level. I don't know what the exposure is, but like it's still enabled by default on Android and iOS. And so if an impersonator can kind of use the 2G network to make like a fake 2G base station, that is a problem. And so like if a carrier knows that there should be no 2G base stations on their network at all, being able to turn that off obviously makes a ton of sense. Outside of I do know that like outside of the United States, a lot of countries, I've heard a lot of reports about like countries in Europe, for example, are still using 2G and 3G very, very widely. It's less of the case in the US. I don't know how prevalent it is in the US at this point, but I know when I interviewed Rudy from Cape in a video we did a few months ago on the channel, he had mentioned that it is still in use in the United States in some areas, so it hasn't been completely phased out according to them either. So I'd have to look into that more, but it's all still, yeah, that technology is still out there, so being able to turn it off entirely is obviously a very good thing for carriers to be able to do. And yeah, it's very nice on like Graphene OS, for example, how you can just turn it off and restrict it to 4G and 5G only, because that's kind of the ideal situation right now. I think a lot of people, at least in the US, certainly don't need 2G and 3G anymore. In other countries, I think some countries still have to catch up a bit and modernize their systems, but we're getting there. We're getting there for sure.
Definitely. I think this was kind of interesting to me because at least in Australia, we only have 4G and 5G. No 3G, no 2G. Like 2G got shut down like 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. So I'm just like, it is definitely interesting to see. There's very different ways that countries are going about implementing that, but it's good because like this said here, like, the 2G network was being used to get people blasted with SMSs, which obviously is not good. I think that was also another issue that we had with like spyware. I think it was like, which one is it? It's the one that they basically create a fake tower to intercept traffic. I can't really remember what it's called right now though.
Like the Stingray devices or
Stingray, yeah. So that is like, I think that could also be something that could protect against something like that as well. It's good to see Google kind of pushing in the right direction in a lot of aspects, at least when it comes to like the AOSP stuff. Just don't look at like all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, are we getting any questions here? I highly doubt carriers, even in countries without 2G and 3G, will actually disable 2G/3G. Really? I mean, I feel like 2G and 3G is really slow, but
I mean, carriers are not exactly on the ball when it comes to enabling security features. So it wouldn't surprise me if people don't take advantage of this, even if it is an option, and even if they could do it with no downside. But yeah, it seems to never be a great thing to put like these features in the carrier's hands, but that's kind of where we are at the moment. Oddbite in the chat works for Cape and knows a lot about cellular stuff. So keep that in mind. But yeah, a lot of good comments about how all of that works in the chat from him here.
I guess if we've got no other questions here, we can dive into this next topic. This was a forum post, but it comes from a Mac Rumors article here. Apple won't change hide my email domain after Backlash. So basically, if you didn't know, Apple was basically thinking of changing the domain that they would use on their hide my email domain because of people being abusing it, and it kind of was having a impact on the deliverability of mail for standard iCloud.com users. So they kind of said, oh, we might be thinking about changing it to private.icloud.com instead. So they were saying that would probably make a distinction between whether an address is a hide my email one or just a standard one, because currently any hide my email address is just at iCloud.com, which was actually really powerful because it meant that basically no one could block it. Because if you blocked at iCloud.com, it would basically block every iCloud email user. So that's how it was kind of strong, because a lot of these services that we recommend, such as like Simple Login or Proton Pass, they use like specific domains like at Simple Login or at Proton Mail or at Proton Pass. And those at passmail.com, and those sort of domains are easy for providers to block and be like, oh, that's an anonymous email. We don't allow that. And that was one like quite big benefit that Apple's hide my email had. And this was kind of like one of these things where if they changed it to private .icloud.com, then it would be basically, oh, we can just block anyone that signs up using that domain. And that would kind of stop people from using this in a way where, they can protect their email address. So Apple said after further consideration and reviewing feedback from the community, it will not make the change. Sign-in with Apple addresses will be issued through private.icloud.com instead of privaterelay.appleid.com starting later this year, and there will be no update for hide my email addresses. So I think this is one of these stories where it's like, public pressure does work. I saw a lot of people complaining about this, and I think Apple is usually they're not too keen on feedback, but it seems like in this instance people were quite vocal against it, and they did end up pulling back and changing their decision, which is good.
Yeah, it's good that Apple came to their senses with this one, because the change didn't seem to make a lot of sense. I think that this is going to earn Apple a lot of goodwill, and maybe that's why they made this decision after that story we talked about a few weeks ago, where they were kind of like, you could de-anonymize anyone using hide my email in private relay because of some bug that they had. And so coming back from that, I think that this will hopefully, I think Apple will certainly benefit from people who don't switch away from their service because of that whole debacle. But yeah, keeping the iCloud.com domain name for these aliases is huge because, yeah, like you were saying, a lot of these other aliasing service, the domain names frequently get blocked, whereas you can't really block at iCloud.com quite as easily. So, yeah, some rare good news from the Apple side of things, that it's a change that I'm glad to see they are not going to make.
Definitely. We got a question here from Roshan Korea Co's 101. Why us, she, and Avatar? So basically, this is a privacy thing. I'd rather not share my face if I can, and this just allows people to be able to see my reactions and be like, wow, and like, it's more interactive that way. I hope it's not too distracting or anything, but it's just a way to protect my privacy, which everyone here should be doing, right? Right, everyone. So protect your privacy. It's important. Yeah.
Crazy. Caring about privacy, unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't really see any other things here, so we could dive into some side updates.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't you start off with what you're working on the video side of things? Because I know there's a lot of exciting news about the channel that we have.
Yes, there is quite a lot of things in the pipeline right now. It's kind of been a slower week of like script writing for both me and Nate, and also just prepping interviews. But if you didn't catch it, the 2026 password manager tier list went up this week, and it definitely people had thoughts, which is good. I think, whenever you post like a tier list or something that has, your opinions or, things that you rank, I think people are always going to have an issue with, oh, you didn't rank this thing, or you didn't rank this thing high enough, or I don't agree with you ranking something that way. And we definitely got some of those comments, but it seems like the majority of people were just like, yeah, this is a solid tier list. And, it's definitely drawing a lot of attention right now to the channel, which is always good. I think the most important thing, though, is that people are switching to better password managers. Please stop using LastPass. Please use a password manager. Like if you learn anything from that video, please just use any of the higher ranked password managers from that video. But yeah, definitely an interesting one. Less scripted than usual. So if you're kind of just want something to watch while you're doing something else, definitely check out the tier list video. It's a good watch, and Nate did a great job ranking everything. So I think you'll all really enjoy that. If you haven't watched it already, we do have an upcoming interview video with Melanie Ensign, and it's definitely an interesting one. We kind of been teasing it for a while. I think we should be good to publish that this week. Next week, I guess. But that'll also be interesting. And of course, we've got, like I mentioned with the script writing, we've got 2 continuations on our Crypto Wars series. So the previous video on Bull Run did quite well. So we're working on a video about Section 702 and Apple's FBI dispute with the iPhone 5C. So that is really going to be quite interesting. I think those videos are also going to turn out great. And considering how well the password manager tier list video did, we are also working on a messenger tier list, which hopefully we'll have that out for sometime in the next little bit, but that's also something that we can tease that will be coming at some point.
Yeah, I'm glad people really like the Bull Run video, kind of the privacy history stuff that we've been putting out, because I think some of these other stories will be very interesting as well. And yeah, like you said, we got a lot of good feedback on the first tier list video that we did, and we want to continue doing it. So I think we'll take that into account for the messenger one. But I'm glad that a lot of people really like the password manager tier list video so far. So yeah, we will continue doing stuff that people respond well to, because that's how we get that information out there. I'll talk about a few site updates that we had, some changes. We've been publishing some minor updates, so some new information about like just disabling Microsoft to recall some features. We kind of expanded our Windows guide a little bit, and we updated some information about email aliases, simple login, and some other minor changes. So those will come out on the website soon. Otherwise, on our website, as usual, at privacyguides.org/news, Freya has been posting a ton of different stories constantly, stuff that we don't have a chance to talk about on here, but are still very interesting. So there's some stories like WhatsApp improving some security features, Android car head units being hacked through their built-in updates, which is crazy. Plain English words being used to hide Windows malware. That's definitely an interesting story to read. And in addition to those news stories, Nate also publishes the data breach roundup every week, and one just went out today with data breaches over the last week that applied to multiple hospitals. Actually, if you scroll through that, there are a ton of data breaches from this week, and you'll see that pretty much every week. There are quite a few to be concerned about. Just kind of a highlight reel of why you need to take like using a good password manager, using these email alias services seriously, because data breaches happen all the time, much more than you would think, as you would discover if you subscribe to these data breach roundups, and making sure that your information isn't shared between these different websites that you use, can't be correlated quite as easily by using different passwords, using different emails, is a really great way to protect yourself against identity theft, against your other accounts being hacked, etc. So yeah, lots of cool news. Again, at privacyguides.org/news. That you could definitely follow, and all of those get published to our forum at discuss.privacyguides.net as well. So there are always good discussions taking place there about all of the news stories that get posted, especially if we can't cover them here on the show. All of the stuff that we do at Privacy Guides is, of course, made possible by you, our supporters. You can sign up for a membership if you'd like, or you can donate if you're able at privacyguides.org/donate, or you could always pick up some swag at shop.privacyguides.org if that's more your thing. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit project. We research and share privacy-related information, and we facilitate that community on our forum and on Matrix, where people can get advice, they can ask questions about staying private online, securing all of your accounts, and preserving your digital rights. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's talk about Meta's latest fine and what it means. And yeah, everyone, just remember to leave your questions in the chat. We're going to be trying to answer questions, do some Q&A stuff in between stories as we go. So if you have any questions about what we're talking about, or just questions about anything at all that might be relevant to us, definitely leave them in the chat, and we will get to them as soon as we can. So yeah, Jordan, let's why don't you take a look at this next story here?
Yeah, definitely. So this is Meta agrees to pay $18 billion to settle a US lawsuit over children's social media addiction. Meta Platforms opens a new tab. Wait, what? Opens a new tab? I think that might be a typo. Will pay up to $18 billion over the next decade and strictly limit how teenagers use Facebook and Instagram, under an agreement with nearly all US states to resolve claims it designed those social media platforms to addict children. Basically, this entire thing, it could provide a template for resolving thousands of other lawsuits against social media companies. Governments around the world are trying to curb children's access to harmful content. And yeah, including a ban in Australia on social media for children under 16. And I believe that's also going on in France as well. So lots of countries are moving in that direction. Meta agreed over the next decade, keyword next decade, to restrict teenagers' use of Facebook and Instagram to 2 hours a day and block all usage from midnight to 6 a.m. absent parental consent. Meta will also disable most push notifications to teenage users during school hours of 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and enhance measures to prevent children from accessing age-restricted content. So the settlement does not require Meta to abandon like personalized recommendations or targeted advertising, but it also does not address some content Meta researchers found particularly problematic, including posts that made Instagram users uncomfortable with their body image. And of course, Meta denied any wrongdoing in agreeing to settle. So I think, this is, on the surface, this sounds good, right? $18 billion. Is that a lot to Meta? No. This is over the next decade as well. So is that really a substantial amount of money for Meta over the next decade? No, not really. So it's a little bit, it does feel a little bit minuscule. We need to be proportionally finding these companies. I guess I can throw it back to you here, though, Jonah. Like this sort of thing where they're applying this to kind of force like age restriction stuff and restrictions on children accessing services. Like that is also a really big issue too, right? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it is kind of an interesting situation. I don't know how much this is going to really impact Meta because, like you said, over the course of a whole decade, is $18 billion really a lot to them? It's probably more. That's kind of a drop in the bucket in terms of their overall revenue, especially over that period of time. And yeah, it just kind of it worsens this problem, I think, that we have with like just this push for age verification technology right now. A lot of these lawsuits, they're going to be responded to basically saying like you need to have a lot more protections for children on these platforms, and then they're going to have to implement these verification processes just to figure out who actually is a child and who isn't. And it again really just delegates like that parental responsibility to the government to kind of parent your children on your behalf, which I think is a dangerous precedent that we're setting. So, well, it's this is definitely a problem that needs to be addressed, and it's important for like Meta to have more parental controls so that like this public health issue that is affecting all of these children and teenagers right now can be resolved. I think that like taking it to this level where like the government has to step in and be like a middleman in between all of these interactions that people have with the internet and with all of these services is a really dangerous position, I think, to take as a society. And yeah, it sets the precedent for even more of the age verification stuff that we've been seeing around the world, which it's very concerning to me. I think it will cause a lot more privacy problems than it could potentially solve.
Yeah, I think also going back to you mentioned like, oh, this 18 billion, surely that's not that much, right? So Meta actually made $200 billion of revenue in 2025. So just to put that in perspective, that is the cost of doing business. That's what we call that. So I think that is kind of frustrating. Like whenever we see this sort of stuff, it's like, it's good that they're like trying to stop these companies from doing a lot of this stuff. I was talking to Nate about this because Nate was working on a short about this. And one comment that he made that I thought was quite clever about this is a lot of these restrictions that they're talking about are things that like adults should have, like algorithmic feeds. Like let's just like remove that. That should not be allowed. Like that shouldn't be a thing that, these platforms shouldn't be able to like, manipulate you and make you addicted. Like this is stuff that like adults could use too. And suddenly when someone turns, as soon as like the clock strikes 12 and someone turns 18, they're suddenly able to use an algorithmic feed and have all these extra features enabled. It's like, is that really something that suddenly people are fine to use? It's something that, these platforms should allow you to disable, or at least, there should be more scrutiny on how that sort of feature works.
I think quite a lot of people would appreciate like the ability to go back to like seeing things in your timeline from only people that you follow, like in the order that they were posted. Like I think a lot of people would like that sort of thing. Of course, maybe they would use those platforms less. It would be less engaging, but I think that would be quite a benefit for a lot of people. And that's the sort of thing that like there should be there should be at least the option to enable that for people who think that they are like highly impacted by this. It shouldn't be limited to just certain groups of people, but it should just be an option. And I think that like all of these improvements should be an option for anybody to take advantage of them. They could be built into, again, like a suite of parental controls to be enforced on certain devices. Like if you buy a device like a phone or an iPad for your child, you probably don't want them to be doing whatever they want with it 24/7. So like having those controls on it makes a lot of sense. And all of that stuff can be done without like the government mandating them or like restricting it based on your ID or your age. It could just be an option that's available to you. And it's a lot of these improvements that these platforms are making for children, just like you said, they should be like available as an option for anyone using these platforms, because I think a lot of the problems that children are facing, it's not just limited to children and teenagers. I think a lot of people find these platforms are too addicting, take up too much time, and don't appreciate that. So yeah, the solutions that we're seeing are definitely not the best way to go about these, in my opinion. But as a lot of people in the comments have been saying now, you know, it doesn't have a lot to do with children specifically. A lot of this, like, think of the children stuff is commonly used as an excuse to implement all sorts of things that are really detrimental to everybody, and this is definitely no exception.
Yeah, it just comes back to the thing that we always keep saying, like, this is something that the government shouldn't be getting their hands in. Unfortunately, they are, and it's becoming very common for countries to be pushing for this now. So use what you can. I think, you know, local parental controls, like Jonah said, is like probably the best way to go. But now that we're seeing, you know, stuff like this happening, it's frustrating. I also do think, you know, a lot of these devices now, they have very good parental controls. Like if you buy an Apple device, it will ask you if you're setting it up for a child. If you buy like any Android device, it will ask if you're setting it up for a child. Same with a Windows computer. So I think we are stepping in the right direction, but in terms of local parental controls and stuff. But I think, you know, when we start moving towards like the government requiring ID or restricting access to social media based on age, that's when it starts becoming like, how do we verify everyone's age? Well, that's got to be done by, you know, verifying everyone's ID. So that, as we know, that doesn't really work that well. They've tried that in Australia. They've tried to ban people under the age of 16 from social media. It doesn't particularly work that well. And it also puts quite a big risk of people's IDs being breached because a lot of times they're processed by these age assurance companies that have really no precedent for processing such large amounts of data and are basically a honeypot for people's information. Like if you're a hacker and you want a large trove of highly sensitive information that you can use to, you know, perform like identity theft, then that would be basically the number one place to target. So it is kind of frustrating, but yeah. Do you see any? There's definitely a lot of comments coming in. So is there any here that are sticking out to you, Jonah?
Oh boy. I know we got some questions in the chat that we should take a look at, but is there any I don't know if I've seen any related to what you were just talking about. I mean, there are some good questions that kind of are what we just pointed out. Roshan Kyriakos, I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly, sorry, but like, isn't there already parental control on devices? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? And a lot of the parental controls we have right now are not very robust, but that's the sort of thing that, like, from a technology standpoint, I think could be improved, like just exposing these options to the standard parental controls and letting the operating system kind of control like what experience an app is going to display to people. I think that that's the kind of improvement that would be nice to see for sure. And having that option available to parents as like a tool when thinking about like these devices that children and teenagers have these days, I think That is definitely something that needs to be improved, but it is something that could be improved on the parental control side more than like the government surveillance and government intervention side of things. I think that is where this becomes very, very concerning.
Definitely. Someone left, JMR said, an RSS reader even lets me combine everything into a single feed with news, Mastodon, and YouTube, all RSS. So yeah, RSS is definitely kind of old school, I feel like. I feel like maybe now it's making a bit of a resurgence. But again, that brings us back to like this really frustrating thing with the Nitter incident is, when a lot of these platforms are blocking access to users who aren't logged in, like a lot of these systems like RSS, it blocks people using RSS to follow their favorite creators. It restricts how you can basically consume content from those platforms. So it is nice. I think, especially with YouTube on RSS, I think that is one thing that is a little bit of a hitch at the moment. But I think, if you're following stuff like actual websites with RSS feeds, Mastodon, I think you can definitely get a way better social media feed that way
Yeah.
than following on these algorithmic social media platforms, especially Twitter, because that is yeah.
It's definitely making a resurgence because like it's the only way to get that these days. They're just you don't have a lot of other options if you just want to see like the things that you follow. Everything is just so algorithmic these days that it is a good option. And thankfully a lot of sites like YouTube, like blogs or news things that you follow do still support RSS. I think like it depends on how you use these social media platforms because there are like two sides of it, but a lot of people do use like Twitter or Reddit just to keep up with news that they care about more than like the social aspect side of things. And that is a use case that could very easily switch to like using a good RSS reader and following your favorite news sources that way. So yeah, it is a cool technology if that works for you.
Definitely.
JMR said, "I'm putting together my local AI PC, waiting at supports." That sounds pretty pricey these days. How's that going for you?
Yeah, that's
Um,
hard.
Roshan, Kyriakos. Again, Blue Sky or Mastodon, which one is better? Personally, I prefer Mastodon. I think that like just from a decentralization perspective, the idea of Mastodon makes a lot more sense to me. I've talked about this before, but like Mastodon is kind of a all-in-one solution where like if you want to host it yourself, you have all of the parts that you need kind of included in the Mastodon software. Whereas like with Blue Sky, for example, you can only self-host like certain aspects of it. Like you can control your own data and like where it's stored, but like accessing that data and then accessing other people's data, those are separate tools, and a lot of those are much harder to self-host than others. So like it's not a fully decentralized network in the way that a lot of people expect, whereas Mastodon really is like the most decentralized version of social media that we can realistically get at the moment. So if you are concerned about like self-hosting or just controlling your own little corner of the internet, or you're worried about this age verification stuff kind of taking over these big platforms, I think that Mastodon is going to be a lot more resilient than Blue Sky when it comes to this sort of thing. And so especially for like all of the social media stuff that we talked about here, but also just in general, I think that Mastodon is the way to go for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely bigger than just Mastodon, right? Like the Fediverse, there's all sorts of stuff. Like we post our videos on PeerTube, but that's also part of the Fediverse, and you can access that through Mastodon. You can access that through Pleroma. You can access that through many different Fediverse services and stuff. So even if you're like not really a fan of Mastodon, you can be like, oh, I can just use Pleroma instead, or I can just use Akoma instead. And there's like lots of different alternatives, different front ends to access these platforms. different backends even. So like, there's a lot of extra choice that you get if you do plan to go that route, especially like Jonah said, if you're self-hosting something, you can kind of choose what software that you're using to connect with people. And I think that is definitely one reason why Blue Sky is becoming a bit of an issue, because Blue Sky has a bit too much centralization on the single, organization that runs and creates Blue Sky. Like it seems like much more of a centralized service where there's less alternatives to that. I know there was Black Sky happening. There was like different front ends for Blue Sky as well. It definitely seems less mature, which makes sense because it hasn't been around as long. But yeah, Privacy Guides does recommend Mastodon on our website. So yeah, we can definitely give it a shot. I would say if you're trying out Mastodon, definitely follow a lot of people. I think the biggest mistake that people make with Mastodon is like not following enough people, and then your feed is just like dead. You need to be following a bunch of people, and the way that people basically, the way content proliferates is basically through boosts. So, if you don't boost something, then no one's going to see it. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting platform. It's definitely worth trying. I Suck says, Mastodon is more private, but has a high entry bars you need to understand, as you have to choose a server and people are too lazy to choose. I don't know if that's really the biggest bar for people joining. I think, when you sign up through joinmastodon.org, it does give you basically a list of general servers that you can join. I know Jonah runs 2, 3,
Yep.
a
I
few.
do.
So like,
That's true. It is tough because like all of these decentralized services, you do sort of have to care whether or not they they work and are private if you want to like take full advantage of them. But I absolutely, if this is the sort of thing that you care about, I don't recommend signing up for like mastodon.social, because that has a lot of problems with like centralizing a lot of people on one big server. And the same, like Matrix has a similar problem where people sign up for matrix.org for chat instead of another server. And so like if decentralization, if privacy is a big concern for you, taking the time to research other servers is important. But I think at the end of the day, signing up for like the quote main instance, so to speak, like mastodon.social, or just the default of whatever like the app provides for you, at worst, it's going to be no worse than like signing up for Blue Sky or signing up for any of these centralized services like Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And so, like if you're just telling other people to sign up and they don't care, like getting them on Mastodon.social is not the worst thing in the world, because at least you can now interact with that person on a more decentralized and more private network. And Mastodon has good tools to like migrate your account later. And so if you do run into issues, or if you do care more about this sort of thing over time, switching to a different server is always an option. And so I think that there is some benefit to having these large kind of general purpose servers like Mastodon.social, where you don't really have to think about it, because it's an entry point for people to get onto these social networks and just start using them. And I think that improves the network effect, and it makes the experience better for people on the network as a whole, even if they're using their own server or some more decentralized or some more specialized instance of Mastodon than the main server provides. So that's something to keep in mind. iSucks as what my servers names are. They are mstdn.party and mstdn.plus are the two that I run, and they have slightly different rules, so you could take a look at them, and they have different moderation teams, although there's a lot of overlap between them. But they're both kind of like general purpose Mastodon instances, and so if you wanted to sign up for one of them, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting that I think one of the big things that I think still needs to happen with Mastodon is it needs to be able to migrate your posts when you migrate servers. That's like the biggest thing that I'm waiting for. because I think that is one thing, if you make a bunch of really good posts and you want to transfer, let's say you're on mastodon.social and you're like, oh, this server's got bad moderation, it's got other issues, I don't want to be on the centralized server, then yeah, you kind of are a bit stuck if you want to transfer your posts. As far as I'm aware, that's not possible between Mastodon servers, but it is possible between different Fediverse services. There is one, I think, that does support that, but it's still not something that Mastodon supports at this point. So do keep that in mind if you do end up deciding to sign up. Everything else gets transferred, just not your posts, which can be a bummer.
Yep. Of course, your post will still exist on like the previous server. So, like your old profile, basically, like your followers will move over, and the old profile gets archived and tells people where your new one is. But it doesn't all disappear. But it is kind of annoying to not have it all in one place anymore. Some improvements could be made, but it's gotten a lot better than it was a few years ago. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah, that's good. People are complaining about mic levels. Everything looks fine in our recording setup, so I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
It could be something on your end, possibly.
I would say this is good advice from Lucas. If you could try turning down the volume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dag Overhaul here said the culture on Mastodon is awful. I would say the culture on Mastodon is very dependent on who you're following.
Yeah.
If you're following people who are like really obnoxious, then yeah, you're gonna have a bad time. But like, if you don't like somebody, you don't have to follow them. You can block them, which is what I do. Like, if I don't want to see someone's posts, I just block them, or or like blacklist them. So yeah, it's really up to you who you're following. You can just not follow people that you don't like.
I mean, in my experience, it's like Mastodon is probably one of the platforms where there's much less of a like cohesive culture than almost any other platform, just because there is no algorithmic timeline, right? Like, there's certainly a culture on Facebook or Twitter because the timeline by default is going to surface like various things directly to you, depending on different biases that the algorithm is going to have. Whereas like yeah, just like you said on Mastodon, it really comes down to who you're following and like the types of people that the people who you're following will boost. One nice thing that you can do on Mastodon, if like you want to follow a person but you don't agree with all of the stuff that you're boosting, you can hide like boosts from certain people, so you only see their posts and not all the stuff that they're reposting. So that's another way that you can kind of take control of that. But yeah, in my experience, the viewpoints on Mastodon have been kind of all over the spectrum, and especially because like anybody can host a Mastodon instance. I mean, you can really find anyone you want on this platform, but there is a problem, I think, maybe with some specific servers having a very opinionated point of view, and maybe that it'll filter your experience that way. Certainly hosting a server yourself, I think you're not going to run into this problem at all. Or using a more general purpose server that isn't going to like block a lot of like specific viewpoints. Those are both ways to kind of avoid that problem. Again, it kind of requires a bit more research, but you have to imagine like each Mastodon instance is basically its own social network, and will have different rules and will have different people in charge of them. And so you have to find one that like you agree with, and Mastodon.social is one that like is kind of unopinionated and kind of hosts the most people, and that might be an option that you want. Or you might want a more specialized community, and you could find one that has a culture that suits you, because there's a lot of like local Mastodon instances, like country or city or specific ones that you could sign up for to just find people in your area. Or a lot of different like theme-based servers, which will definitely have more of a ingrained culture than another one. Like you can find Mastodon servers dedicated to like gaming or to art or to all sorts of different topics. So that will definitely have an impact on what you see. But yeah, self-hosting it yourself or doing a more general purpose instance, I think you'll run into those problems a lot less. But yeah, again, it's like a each instance is its own social network. You just happen to be able to follow people on other ones as well, but that's kind of like a side thing.
I will say, as sort of, I'm sure Jonah can probably speak to this a bit more, but I will say, if you are setting up your own instance, just be prepared to see a lot of things. There's definitely a lot of things that go on in the background when you join one of these instances. They have pre-set up block lists. They have stuff that is set up to block, there are instances that are just there to basically put out spam, put out not safe for work content that you probably wouldn't want to be seeing, even, stuff that is morally and legally questionable as well. So, that sort of thing still exists on these federated platforms, and that is something that you do trust when you join one of these servers. That is something that you don't have to worry about. But if you do decide to set up your own, then that is one thing you will have to manage yourself, because yeah, that can be another tricky thing. I'm sure you probably have something to add on that, Jonah.
Yeah. Yeah, it just you can have all sorts of different experiences on Mastodon is kind of what it is at the end of the day. Like I use a Mastodon server that basically doesn't block anything at all, and I haven't really had any problems just because, like you said, a lot of it comes down to who you follow, and I just don't follow problematic people, and so that hasn't been an issue.
Yeah, I think there's one comment here again from Dag Overhaul. You follow hashtag AI because you're into AI, and 90% of people are advocating to do some bad stuff to data centers, and they're not getting moderated because the mods agree. Again, like Jonah said, like this is up to the specific social network that the person is posting on. If the people on that server don't believe that that is against their rules, then they won't do anything against that. Again, though, that is one thing I think you will find that with a non-commercial social media that is very much like grassroots funded and non-corporate, I think you'll find that, a lot of this corporate stuff like AI and, related topics are definitely not going to be as popular on these platforms. So there are certainly pockets of AI positive people on Mastodon. I've seen them. They exist. So you can definitely find them. If you don't like, people, what people are saying, you can just block them and you won't see them again in your hashtags. So I would say, there's definitely a trend of people's views because it's non-corporate, but I'm sure you'll be able to find some place where there's people that you agree with, because I've seen it. Like a lot of people complain that it's like that Mastodon has like it's quite left wing, or like there's not a lot of like political diversity. There is, you just have to look for it. There are people that are not aligning with that. It does exist. So yeah, it just kind of comes with the way that the platform is, like how it's non-commercial, and there's a lot of people that are just running these servers specifically just because they love the Fediverse and they want to support the network. So, a lot of times they're not going to be a big fan of AI. Most of the Fediverse is aggressively AI. It's a culture issue, not a tech issue. I like ActivityPub. I think you are correct. I think there is a culture of anti-AI on there, but yeah, that might just be, I'm not really sure what the answer to that is. I'm sure there's people that are positive about AI on the Fediverse, but definitely a lot less than other platforms.
Yeah, I mean, some of that is kind of inherent to, like, I think the Fediverse is going to be more creator focused. And a lot of people who like are actually creating things are going to have stronger opinions about AI than other platforms where like engagement is kind of king, and AI really like a lot of people make a lot of money by posting AI stuff to Twitter and YouTube and other platforms right now, and there's no way to do that on Mastodon. And so the people who really like AI have not flocked to Mastodon quite as much as other platforms, but I don't know if that's a Mastodon specific issue. It's like I don't think you'll find a ton of there aren't a lot of like AI people outside of these big platforms either, I think. Yeah, with that out of the way, why don't we take a look at another story here? I have one about Microsoft. This was reported by Bleeping Computer. They say Microsoft tests new privacy controls for Windows 11 desktop apps. Windows insiders can now manage camera, microphone, and location permissions for individual desktop apps. Previously, access for traditional desktop applications was managed through a single device-wide setting, Microsoft explained. With this update, you can review and control access on an app-by-app basis, giving you greater visibility into which apps are requesting access to sensitive resources and more control over your privacy choices. So you can go, if you have Windows Insider right now, you can go to Settings, Privacy and Security, Camera, Microphone, or Location, and then you can grant access to apps using dedicated toggles. So this access has been in Windows for quite a while, but it was only applied to apps that you got through the Microsoft Store, kind of using their new system, whereas this should apply to any apps that you have installed, because a lot of apps were not distributed through the Microsoft Store, and we're still using these older, the legacy app development framework. So this follows Microsoft's February announcement that it plans to introduce smartphone-style app permission prompts in Windows 11, which would request user consent before apps can access sensitive resources such as cameras and microphones. As Windows platform engineer Logan Iyer said at the time, the new security model was prompted by apps increasingly installing unwanted software, overriding settings, or even modifying core Windows experiences without prior user consent. All of that stuff, I think, has been happening since the beginning of time with Windows, so it's good that they finally noticed that this is a problem and are trying to solve it now. So I guess that's a good thing. Permission prompts, kind of like smartphone style, are definitely a good thing for any platform to have. I think on the desktop side of things, Mac OS and maybe Chrome OS have been kind of leading in that regard for quite a while, but we've definitely seen a lot of catching up on the Linux and Windows side of things for sure. So it's good to see. He sucks, question mark, said in the chat, over 30 years. He's like, yeah, I mean, is it better late than never? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely good to see at least, these positive changes being made. But yeah, I think it's one of these things that there definitely needs to be more tightening of the desktop security model, and it just hasn't happened. I'm not really sure why I guess it would require quite a significant rewrite of the entire operating system. I think the thing with Windows is that it's all so legacy. There's so much legacy code. Like I've seen people like opening control panels that were like part of like Windows 7 on like Windows 11, like stuff that you would assume it doesn't exist in Windows 11 is still there. There's like lots of legacy code to support applications that don't don't support the latest operating system, Windows 11. Whereas I think we've seen with Mac OS, they kind of just ditch that. If you're not running the latest operating system, you can't run the latest software, which is an interesting, different approach, I think. But it's definitely interesting to see them at least tighten some of these controls, and it's good to see that they're applying it to not just Windows Store apps, because that was the issue that we've had for a while, is that a lot of the actual sandboxing was limited to only apps from the Windows Store, which seems to have gotten better. There's more apps that are on the Windows Store now, but again, not every single app that you have is going to be available on the Windows Store, which makes it more complicated. But it's good to see that they're moving in the right direction. At least we got some, for a change, we have positive Windows news, which is very rare, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think this fixes any of the many other problems we have with Windows, but it's always good to see with these less private platforms, like any improvements that can be made. Um, any improvements that can be made, the better, I guess.
We Are at War said there's parts that are still there from 1995. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was that bad, but
I mean, I think there's parts from before then, honestly. I don't remember this. I remember seeing an article or a post or something about it. There's like a Windows 3.0 component you can find in some obscure setting somewhere. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's funny, all of the super old legacy stuff that still exists in Windows. I mean, there's something to be said for backwards compatibility, I guess, but at a certain point, it's good to see some updates for the modern day.
JMR said, I live in a Windows-free household now. Finally switched my wife to Linux too. Yeah, I mean, that's what we can all hope for. I think if you have the ability to do so, that's something you should be doing. Obviously, not everyone gets a choice. I know people use it for work. People use it because of gaming. People use it for all sorts of reasons. But I think just getting those extra permissions is going to help a little bit, at least tighten things up a little bit. I'm not seeing any other comments here, so I guess we could just jump into this next story. This one is from Obscura VPN. So, introducing Obscura VPN for Windows. Starting today, Obscura VPN is available as a native app for Windows. As one of our most requested features, it brings two-party relay architecture and quick obfuscation to your desktop. So no one, not even us, can tie your identity to your traffic. Windows 10 and 11 are both supported. Around a third of Windows users are still on 10, and privacy tools should not require a new PC. And Obscura is offering a 25% discount to users that sign up now with the code Windows26. The number of devices has also increased. So they've went from 3 users to 5 users. And they also hinted that Linux is coming soon, and they listed a waitlist. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out the blog post, get signed up for that waitlist. I think it's, considering how quickly Obscura is rolling out these clients, I think we'll find that the Linux one will not be too far away. It's definitely good to see them release a native app as opposed to a lot of these other VPN companies releasing sort of web app based stuff. That's also interesting, but I think we should probably talk. I guess I'll throw this back to you, Jonah. Like, I know you and some other team members have kind of been checking out this new product. It's not something that's listed on the site yet, but it's definitely is interesting. Do you want to maybe talk about it?
Yeah, a lot of people on the forum are really interested in Obscura VPN. So I know like Nick on our team has started to look at it a bit, and we've been looking at it for a while. I think one of the issues is they didn't support Windows. They don't support Linux yet. Typically, we want to see these platforms support like the operating systems that we would recommend, because it makes it easier. Having like the best privacy protections that Obscura can provide only on Mac OS was kind of made it a tough sell. But it's an interesting service. Obscura VPN, if you haven't heard of it, they're basically a VPN service that kind of partnered with Mullvad, where they have like a two-party system similar to iCloud Private Relay, for example, where basically you pay Obscura VPN and your device connects to Obscura VPN, but then they forward the traffic to Mullvad, and then Mullvad connects you to the website. And so your connection is actually encrypted between your device and Mullvad. And the benefit of this system is that Mullvad isn't getting your payment information, and they're not getting your device's IP address, because that information is being provided to Obscura, and then Obscura isn't getting information about the websites that you visit, because that information is encrypted between your device and Mullvad. So it kind of just splits up who can access that data. Obscura gets information about you, like your payment information and your IP, and Mullvad gets information about what you're doing, like the websites that you're visiting. But for that to be tied together, they would basically have to work together, which they're incentivized not to do. So it's a cool privacy technology. We've talked about it a bit long before even Obscura VPN came out, how we wished more VPN providers would kind of take an approach to split apart that information a bit. It's kind of a good middle ground between like a VPN and something like Tor, which takes that separation kind of to the extreme. But the problem we see with Tor that a lot of people have is that the even more extreme separation with more than 2 hops and the volunteer run aspect of things, it increases the latency. It kind of slows things down, so people don't get quite as good performance. So hopefully Obscura VPN, in theory, should provide a lot better performance than something like Tor, because it's just dedicated servers. But yeah, it's cool stuff. I'm excited to see that Linux client support is coming soon. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see for that. But right now, Obscura VPN, if you did have it, you can technically use it on any platform through like a WireGuard configuration tool that they have. But the native client has a lot of good improvements, like rotating that WireGuard key more frequently or automatically, which has significant privacy improvements. So getting those native clients on multiple platforms is super important. So it's cool that they're working on that.
Yeah, definitely keep everything locked on privacy guides. We'll probably have something about that at some point. We'll obviously have to review that and see if it's worth adding to the website. But it does seem like we'll have to wait a little bit longer, considering there's no Linux client yet. But I've already seen people posting like screenshots of the performance difference between using a normal VPN and versus using like this sort of multi-hop setup, and the difference is not too much. So it is kind of promising that this could be something that is usable for a lot of people. I know that I think I've heard this be kind of compared to iCloud's private relay almost. I think it is slightly different in the way that it works, but I've used that and I've had no issues with speed. So I think this is definitely going to be, it's one of these things where we want to improve on the trust model of a normal VPN, and Obscura kind of can do that because, you know, obviously you don't have to trust a single provider with your traffic, which is definitely really interesting change. I guess we could jump into possibly answering some questions here. We did have one from the forum, if we wanted to quickly jump over to that. So last week we had a viewer who was listening to the podcast and they were really enjoying it, but they said, you both appear to not be big fans of Mozilla/Firefox. I would love to know which browser you both use on desktop currently. Asking because I'm also increasingly becoming more and more frustrated with Mozilla and their odd decisions. So, Jonah, how do you?
Yeah, well, right now I'm using I use Brave Origin, and I use normal Brave, and I use Zen browser. So I'm kind of using a lot of browsers at the moment, but I like all of them so far. So yeah, probably Zen browser I've been using the most lately, but because it is Firefox based, I have been running into more and more compatibility issues, unfortunately, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, Brave has been a bit better in that regard, unfortunately. But I like Brave as well. So there's a lot of good options in the browser space at the moment that I think help you kind of avoid the problems, especially with Google Chrome, but also yeah, standard Firefox at the moment is not been my favorite to recommend lately because of the direction that Mozilla has been going in for quite a long time.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely Firefox is definitely in an interesting spot. I personally stopped using it. Again, yeah, I was originally using Arc browser because I was a really big fan of the vertical tabs, which which was basically the one feature that the browser actually pioneered. Is like it basically became this whole thing, and now every single browser has vertical tabs. Not every single browser has a good implementation of it, which is kind of the frustrating part. Like Firefox's implementation is not great versus Zen browser's implementation, which is much similar to Arc browser's implementation. I don't think this is really a privacy thing though, so I'm not really sure how relevant that is to your question. Um, but I've also been using Zen browser. I also have Helium browser. I also have Safari. Like, I don't know. I just kind of mix it up. We're at War just mentioned thoughts on Helium. Used Brave before they killed my extensions. I think Helium is interesting. It's like a very stripped down Chromium like based browser. Like it's nice. It just kind of gets out of the way and it does what you need in a browser. But I will say, even though it does have vertical tabs, it doesn't operate in quite as well of a way as Zen browser does. Just being able to pin folders and pin websites and stuff like that, and be able to access them easily is kind of really big for me because I'm constantly going into like the same website over and over again, like YouTube Studio or like Ghost or Buffer or Transistor. It's like all these platforms that I have to check in on like quite often. So it's really nice to have that pinned like that. And as far as I know, Helium doesn't let you do that, which is interesting. Someone here mentioned Molvad browser.
I do use Molvad browser, but I don't go to a lot of websites these days that I'm not logged into. I'm usually just checking accounts more than anything, and so I don't use Molvad browser for like anything that I am logged into, like social media, like the Privacy Guides forum, like our Nextcloud and YouTube Studio and all of that stuff. So yeah, not a lot of reason to use it a lot. But if you're more doing like searching the internet for stuff, reading like news articles, that sort of thing, Molvat browser is a great option for sure. And usually we recommend like a multiple browser approach. So we would say like use Brave for stuff you're signed into and Molvat browser for stuff that you're not signed into. And that sort of thing is typically the setup we'd go with.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've definitely had issues. I'm not sure if it's an issue with my setup specifically, but Molvad browser does seem really slow at loading web pages. I'm not sure if that's something you've
Interesting.
also learned.
I haven't run into that, but that would be good to look into.
Okay, maybe it's just an issue on my setup. Have you heard about Ladybird browser?
I don't know if I mean, is it out yet? I've certainly heard that they're working on it, but no way to really know if it's good. But it's good that people are working on something other than Chromium and Firefox. It's good to have more options. Hello world, I do not have any issues with slowness. Yeah, I haven't heard of that with mobile browser either. So that it might depend on your settings. Do you have like, are you in safest mode or?
No, it might be something to do with Molvad's DNS. Maybe there's no like DNS resolver in Australia or something. I'm not really sure. It could be something like that.
Interesting. Roshan Kyriakos says Ladybird browser is out for Linux. Interesting. I will have to take a look. I have not used Ladybird browser, that's for sure, but it's something I've been keeping an eye on off and on for a little bit. So
I will
yeah.
just quickly add though, before you consider trying it out, it did have a controversy where they did rewrite the entire code base from C++ to Rust using AI. So that is one thing that is you need to be
Interesting.
aware of with Ladybird. I think that's
I've
definitely a
not heard
choice.
that.
I would probably, I don't know, that just doesn't seem like the greatest idea to me, especially for a browser. So that definitely put me off the project a little bit. I think the one that I've seen that looks the most promising is Servo, I think it's called.
Yep.
Which also doesn't seem to be like, I believe it's using Rust and it's not using AI, so maybe that would be a better option. But yeah, I think when it comes to your web browser, rewriting the whole code base in using Claude Code is probably not the greatest idea.
Yeah, that seems kind of rough.
Yes.
We are at Warside. My thoughts about Obscura browsers is that they have a unique user agent that you'll probably want to spoof somehow to limit fingerprinting. Maybe personally, if you're talking about something like Brave or something like Zen browser or something like LibreWolf, there are some benefits to spoofing that, but at the end of the day, pretty much any browser is going to be fingerprintable no matter like what stuff you're spoofing. Like it's going to be very hard to convince somebody that you're not using Zen browser or Brave browser if you are, even if you change these things. The best solution to this is using a browser dedicated to this, like Mulvad browser, where people can tell that you're using Mulvad browser, but like blending in between different Mulvad browser users is kind of the intended purpose of it. And so using that for locked out sites is important. But that's why we typically would recommend Mulvad browser for sites that you're not logged into, because then they can't track you if you're also using a VPN alongside it. So that prevents people from tracking you via your IP address as well. Whereas with something like Brave, it's just kind of something that you have to accept at the moment, that all of these other browsers are not hardened against this kind of fingerprinting, like advanced fingerprinting trackers and that sort of thing.
Definitely. Someone here said, Roy said, Safari question mark. Yeah, I think, it is an option if you are only on an Apple device. A lot of times Safari is going to have the best protection, or it's going to have the best options available for protecting yourself. Like you can install ad blockers, and it does have some fingerprinting resistance as well. But yeah, the issue with iOS is every single web browser is basically just based on Safari, so you're not really getting any extra bells and whistles. I know the Brave browser on iOS definitely does have like some extra little things. I'm not really sure how much that would compare to Safari, but it does seem like Safari has some of those extra perks, like private relay is one that's pretty cool, and it does have fingerprinting protection too. So it's not the worst choice, but it is recommended in our recommendations for iOS and iPadOS devices. Oddbite says, "What about Pale Moon?" What a throwback. Yeah, that's definitely. Please don't use that. Yeah. Also, a reminder to members, we do have a members-only chat, and you can leave questions in there if you want us to answer any of those as well. We try to get to those as soon as we can. I'm not seeing any questions per se in there right now. I'm just seeing people kind of discussing the topics that we talked about so far. So if there are any members watching and you want to get a question answered and you don't want to put it in the chat, then that is also completely possible too. I'm not really seeing any other questions. I guess we could start rolling out to the outro now.
Yeah.
There is a question here. Actually, I'm seeing one. Is Linux Mint or Fedora recommended? I have flashed Ubuntu and still wondering.
Yeah, we typically recommend Fedora is one. If you go to our website under the recommendations tab, we do have a full Linux page with a lot of different options. Linux Mint is usually one we would recommend less because it tends to be behind on updates and makes some like the further you get abstracted from like the upstream ones like Debian and Ubuntu, the trickier it is to maintain, I think. But really, any Linux distro is going to be better than using something other than Linux from a privacy perspective. So the choice doesn't matter a ton, is what I would say.
Yeah, definitely good points. There are definitely recommendations that we have that are like more pointed towards security. So if it's like, oh, you want like the maximum security on Linux, we did do like a video about it. Secure Blue is an interesting project to check out. It's definitely a different approach to Linux. More of a focus on using flat packs, and it's definitely towards people that are a bit more technical, but it could be interesting to check that out too, because that is on our recommendations too. I'm sure some BSD folks will like to have a word with you. I mean, I guess, but like, as far as I know, like, FreeBSD is maybe the closest thing that we have that could be maybe, but like, as far as I know, it's still missing some stuff that Linux has. Like, so I'm not really sure how useful that recommendation would be when you could just use Fedora. Like, I'm not really sure what benefits you would get from using like FreeBSD or something instead. Yeah.
I think that kind of probably wraps things up for the week. We're approaching 2 hours here. So yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. All of the updates from this episode of This Week in Privacy, we share them on our website on the blog every week, so you can sign up for the newsletter, or you can subscribe with your favorite RSS reader like we talked about if you want to stay tuned and find the sources for this episode. For people who prefer audio, we also offer a podcast version of this available on all podcast platforms and RSS, and we sync these recordings to PeerTube as well, so you can watch them outside of YouTube. Privacy Guides, again, we're an impartial nonprofit organization. We're focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, you can make a donation on our website at privacyguides.org/donate. To make a donation, you can go to our website and click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of the page. You can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or you can opt to donate anonymously using Monero or your favorite cryptocurrency. Becoming a paid member of Privacy Guides will unlock exclusive perks like early access to our video content, priority during the This Week in Privacy live stream Q&A. You'll also get a cool badge on your profile on the Privacy Guides forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. Thank you all for watching again, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.